Welcome to the final day of CUESEF 2022 and our first session on our final day this Friday, titled The Educational Work of Foodways. So I'm your moderator today, and my name is Kirk Holbrook. Currently, I am the director of Pitt's Community Engagement Center at the University of Pittsburgh. But beyond that, I'm a community member, longtime advocate of all things education and community benefiting. And so it's really exciting to be here today for such an important discussion and conversation. So today's discussion is a very important discussion, as we not only discuss the importance of food pathways and food justice, but we also will examine what practices to address food insecurity look like here locally and around the country. We want to look at what it looks like for communities to be self-determinant in providing access to food, both as a means of survival, but also as an active form of resistance. Finally, we want to understand what it looks like in real time to take the nourishment of our communities, our families and children into our own hands. And ultimately, we want to explore how this work impacts our educational systems. So before we begin our conversation today, I wanted to start with a land acknowledgement, recognizing that where some of us are coming from today, and the land that the University of Pittsburgh currently occupies is the home of the indigenous original people of the Adena culture, Hopewell culture, and the Monongahela peoples. I think it's important, as I'm sure we all recognize, that as we begin to highlight the present day work of original people in places like the Hill District, addressing issues of food insecurity, that we recognize the ancestral legacy of peoples who also used this very same land for the sustenance of their people, cultivating pumpkin, squash, sunflower, and other crops. So thank you for collectively taking the time to recognize the intersections of past and present during today's discussion as we talk about the educational work of Foodways. So to begin today's discussion, I would like to start with introductions from our esteemed panelists, and in a second, I'll bring up a short PowerPoint. You will hear from our three partners this morning about their roles in addressing the needs of our communities, families, and children through food, through various food initiatives. Each organization you will learn about fulfills a unique and needed niche. And through our discussion, we will see how each lever is an invaluable necessity to achieve a future of food security. Lastly, many of the examples you'll hear about today are anchored and rooted out of the historic Hill District, a place that I call home, a place that I work in, also a place with a rich historical legacy of Black innovation, excellence, and resilience. So without further delay, please let me introduce you to our panelists. So, and I'm gonna just introduce you guys really quickly, and then I'll call on you one by one to start going through your presentation. So we have first, Raynise Kelly of Soil Sisters, Claudie Pierre of Eminent Hospitality Solutions and the EAT Initiative. Did I get it right there, Claudie? And Shinora Grayson from the CARES Community Healing Garden. So first, I would like an opportunity for Raynise of Soil Sisters to talk a little bit more about your organization. Raynise?
Absolutely. Thank you all for being on the call and listening in. I appreciate the invite. I'm thrilled to talk about Soil Sisters and to be on a panel with familiar faces. Soil Sisters is a business that my sister and I, as you can see in the photo, that's my biological sister, same mom, same dad. Together, we started this business. It's still in transition. We're building a nursery on our grandparents' vacant lot in Belsuver. So this business is really rooted in our neighborhood. It's really looking to branch into other communities and really just support everyone who looks like us as we embark on this journey of feeding ourselves. So our main mission is really just to connect communities, growers, gardeners to the land, our land, without having to travel all over the city to obtain fresh, nutritionally dense food. Thank you, Kirk.
Thank you, Raynise. And we're really excited to learn so much more about the work you do through our discussion today. Next, I would like to invite Mr. Claude Pierre from Eminent Hospitality Solutions and the EAT Initiative to talk more about the work that he does.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Peace. I'm Chef Claude Pierre. I am excited to be here. One of the biggest things is that I'm excited to talk about the EAT Initiative, as well as Eminent Hospitality. Eminent is our for-profit. We do catering. We talk about, hospitality and also workforce development. But we also have our EAT Initiative, Empowerment, Awareness, and Training Initiative, where we literally believe that food is a basic human right. So we use, policy, people, programming, and the beautiful people to make sure that we have food access for everybody. We believe in a food secure city, and we believe Pittsburgh has the science, technology, engineering, arts, and math to actually create the first food secure city and then transition that into other cities as well. So I'm excited to be here, and thank you everybody for pulling up.
Thank you, Claude. And Shinora, last but certainly not least, we would love to hear more about you and your work through the CARES Community Healing Garden. Shinora, I know there's several photos that we have for you to represent your work today. So just let me know when you would like me to kind of change to the next slide.
Oh, you can just do it throughout because I'll only take like 30 seconds. But I'm Shinora Johnson with the Center That Cares. We are an after-school enrichment program, and I will be coming to you in the background of community building. We started 22 years ago as a small after-school enrichment program and have grown to 2 sites. We have a community garden that is used for healing and being able to provide access to food for members of our community. We'll partner with volunteers and use a urban lot that was next door to one of our sites as a gathering place for gardeners and people of all ages to experience healthy harvest and learning and growing the food. The food in the garden is open and available to whomever. You can always come and get some fresh vegetables. We also have a cafe down the street in the Hill District to help have a restaurant in our neighborhood. So I'm here really as a grassroots organization that helps in the lens of community building, community access, and partnering with churches and the community to make things happen for everyone that needs help. So these are just some of our students that attend the Grayson Center that are 6th through 12th grade.
Thanks so much, Shinora. So before we get started, let me stop sharing my screen. I did want to provide first, I wanted to let everyone know that as we go through our panel discussion and we ask our questions, we will be closely monitoring the chat. So if there's any questions that you have, please feel free to pose them and we will be responsive. But before we begin our panel discussion, I wanted to invite Cassandra Brentley into the discussion to really talk about how we arrived at this place today and what was some of the work that was done before that led us to really recognizing how important it was to incorporate this conversation in CUESEF 2022. Cassandra?
Good morning, everyone. I wanted to just take a moment and share a little about how we arrived at this topic for our panel discussion today. I'm Dr. Cassandra Brentley. I'm the Director of Special Projects in the Center for Urban Education, and I run a after-school math mentoring program called Ready to Learn. It's focused on supporting students, middle school students, algebra development, and we do that through the use of social justice math projects. So every year at the end of our time together with students, typically in the spring, the students work really diligently on a social justice math project focused around a theme. This year, our theme was food insecurity in Pittsburgh. And we took the students through this project in where we first asked them to think about questions, a compelling question that they really wanted to dive into and investigate. And from there, they created guiding questions that then led them to use math to interrogate those questions and to come up with solutions. What our students came up with was really amazing in terms of how they were able to connect the lack of access to healthy food to different learning outcomes for students. And that really led us to this conversation today to think more deeply about how food really impacts education and communities in lots of different ways. So I'm really excited about the panelists that we have today. And thank you so much, Kirk, for moderating our conversation. And I'm really looking forward to the rich dialogue that we'll experience this morning.
Thank you so much, Dr. Brentley. And it's really exciting to hear of the foundational work, again, that led us to this great discussion today. All right, so I have a series of questions that I've prepared for our panelists, but again, this is going to be a fluid conversation, and please, as things interest you or questions pop in your mind, please pose those, and we're happy to enhance the forum that we've set out for today's discussion. I first would like to start with a question for all of our panelists. This question is kind of going to set the stage. So I would like to know, how do you define food justice? And we can start with Claudia. Claudia, I think you're still on mute. And the question is, how do you define food justice?
So good morning, everybody. So the funniest thing about food justice is you got to talk about food injustice, if that's okay, right? So when we think of food justice, you got to think that there's obviously something that's happening systemically from a policy standpoint, from a community standpoint, that all of a sudden needs justice. So when we say food justice, we believe that food is a basic human right. Food is grown from the dirt and the ground, the natural earth. So what we believe is that we need to use the people, policy, strategy to literally change laws and make sure that we have legislation, and also make sure we have access to certain things to allow us. And a city like Pittsburgh is perfect to talk about this conversation, because the amount of educational systems that we have between the charter schools, and we don't even want to talk about prison pipeline. We're talking about straight up universities. We're talking about science, technology, engineering, arts, math, sciences. These are the things that we already have, low-hanging fruit, that I believe that when you say injustice, there should be no reason that a space like the Hill District does not have access to fresh produce and food, unless it's a grassroots organization that has to use capacity to go and get that. So that's, when I think of food justice, I think of the injustice. And I think that we need to address that as well. So that's just my kind of take on it. If you got, and I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Claudia. Raynise, I wanted to get your response. How do you define food justice?
I appreciate Chef Claudia's take on it, because it's important that we remember the injustices that happen between our food, our homes, and so on and thus forth. But there's also, you have to have a dose of optimism to keep going and keep wanting to be able to fight against these injustices. So when I think about food justice, I think about it being the vehicle to a healthy community, to really gain the access we need to have food justice. So with that fine balance that Chef Claudia was just previously mentioning, we have this vehicle to get us to a place where our food is affordable, our food is grown locally. We have the ability to create systems in our neighborhoods that best suit us. So Chef Claudia is representing and mentioning the Hill District, where my business and my focus is predominantly in the Hilltop Belsuver area. And similar to what's going on in the Hill, we do not have a grocery store that's very close. So there for surely are injustices in that space. But when I think so much about it, it turns the goal of serving the justice, it makes it hard to work sometimes. So there's a fine balance between both of those places. It's important to remember the injustice and not to settle on the small, goals that we reach, because it's not quite food justice when there are small things that happen, like pop-up farmers markets, but are any of those farmers our farmers? Are those profits going back into our community, or is this farmer being, profiting here in our communities and then going off into a rural or suburban area? So, we have to think about it from both lenses. And so, yeah, that's my take.
Thank you so much, Raynise. So we heard from Chef Claudia about food justice and being tied into the need to change laws and access and policy. Raynise very eloquently talked about her vision of food justice as being a vehicle to a healthy community, but not that all, being sure to recognize that not all initiatives are food justice, right? Because they still may be tied into systems that exploit or keep access from certain groups. Shinora, I would like to hear you respond to this question. How do you define food justice?
Actually, when I was doing some research on what food justice is, and you talked about tying it into everything, like food justice is really communities exercising their right to grow, sell, and eat like healthy food, right? And also having healthy food that is fresh and affordable, as well as culturally appropriate and locally grown. But we talk about the laws, it is sometimes and oftentimes tied to racial justice, food security, as well as food sovereignty. And so making sure that we are cognizant that in terms of racial justice, that we have like equitable opportunities and outcomes to have fresh food for all races and all communities. When we talk about food justice, and food security, it's about all members of community have access to equitable, adequate amounts of affordable, nutritious, culturally appropriate food. And then, food sovereignty is about the nation having control over their food supplies. Like, is the food stuck in the ocean? Was hay $3 last month and now it's $15 this month? And what's going to happen when we're trying to actually grow our food and passing that on to the consumers without having affordable food? So at the end of the day, I feel like it's just having access to affordable, not going into the grocery store and having food that is spoiled and not fresh, and having access to the food and not having to travel far to get it.
Thank you so much, Shinora. And I really like how you tied and called out food justice, the intersections naturally with racial justice and food sovereignty. And so I wanted to kind of build on one of the comments that Raynise made in her definition of food justice. And I know, Raynise, you talked about your work that you do in the South Hilltop communities, and shout out to Belsuver and Knoxville and all those beautiful places up there. And you talked about the reality of not having a grocery store. And we know historically, when I first started hearing about the Hill districts, for example, lack of not having a grocery store for years, we typically had heard it referred to as a food desert. But more recently, we're hearing different terminology. So Raynise, I wanted to ask you, why do you think it is important to frame food access disparities or food insecurity as food apartheid instead of food deserts, as we more commonly used to hear?
Yeah, Chef Claudia also, pointed to touch base on that a bit. The importance in framing these terms and expressing them and fitting situations is because these terms are what takes our movement to policies. If we continue to call our communities food deserts, you assume this is a natural occurrence. Perhaps there's nobody there, it's a desert. Why do we need food there anyway? You go to these communities and you see there are people who have, put boots on the ground and, made gardens out of just containers. And, there are people who know exactly when to come to work together, when to harvest. They know who to give the food to so that a meal can be prepared for more than 10 people or so. And so how can we call a community like that a desert when there are things happening? Now, if you come and maybe you see some vacant lots or some dilapidated buildings, you may assume that, but there are people who know exactly what's going on. So when you call it a food apartheid, now we're looking at, well, what was here prior to this and what's changed and who's still here now? How are they gathering their food? How long does it take them to get from A to B? And it just really changes the dynamic of what you're envisioning, because a lot of times you're talking to somebody who's never seen this space. So if we're words are power. If we're calling it like it is, now someone can actually understand or fathom, maybe even think about a time. There are so many seniors in Belsuver who can talk about so many corner stores that had a yard or a garden attached to it and they grew and sold their produce there, but now that's non-existent. We have like Shop and Save, who, is what we have. That's what we have to use, but there's no connection to that space, not even to the point where when we had community events, they were like donating food. Like there used to be a relationship where they're like, this community is implementing events and doing things, let's provide something to them. Like we've lost those types of connections where there's a system in place and we support each other. And I think that a part of that has contributed to just the terminology and how we talk about these spaces now.
Thank you so much, Raynise. And before, we provide a space for Claudia or Shinora if they wanted to add on, I really like how you started with changing the language really takes the movements to policy. And then also the deficit mindset that must be that's behind thinking of our communities as deserts, right? And not recognizing that there's things happening and there's reasons why these disparities exist, and examining what has changed. So I think that was great to highlight. Claudia or Shinora, you have any thoughts about the elevated change to ensuring that these issues are better categorized as food apartheid issues versus food deserts?
I think the biggest thing that, Raynise, you hit it on the head. This is systematic. This is something that you got to remember. Sometimes they allow certain areas to go down in value so the people with capital could come in and start to develop, if you will, and it makes it hard. So now you have the people that are usually in that area displaced, that property goes down, developers come in, they develop it, and now they can get top dollar in a place that, like, there's no reason why the Hill District, as opposed to the Cultural District, like the disparity is unreal. That's one of the highest grossing theater districts in the world, really in the nation. And now literally less than a mile away in the Hill District, there's no grocery store. And the only people that could develop is if you have access to a certain amount of capital. The other thing I will say is, like I said, we have literally all the pieces to the puzzle, and allowing the community to build with people versus saying, hey, we have an answer for you. So what people do is they make sure that your problem is exacerbated, especially with a pandemic. And then they say, hey, we got a solution. Why don't you do this? And you could move out to these areas and let us do this. So I think it's important for us to note, we have universities, we have the science, we have all the corporations, and we have one of the biggest philanthropy opportunities here in the city of Pittsburgh to literally say, hey, if we start to break some of these silos, we can actually help the community help themselves. And so where this is very fertile ground, as you mentioned before, this is holy ground, low key. You know what I mean? Like, we need to act as such, right? And when we're talking about, the hilltop, we're talking about the Hill District, we need to realize that these are people who were steel mill workers, who built this city, who built the country, and we need to act as such. So I think for me, we do it because we believe in it. We are servants. We want to do this, and we also want to make money while doing it. But when our opportunities are being pulled from us because people see a dollar sign, you would be surprised. Last thing I'm gonna say is there's something called asset framing. I work with a group called Be Me. The Be Me community, we talk a lot about asset framing in our community. And instead of talking about, at-risk youth and, blighted, which it is blighted and it is at-risk youth, we like to call our students, their resources. They are up and coming. This is beautiful people. Why do we do that? Because in that way, you're not giving us money for a Band-Aid. You're actually giving us money to invest. And when you invest in something, you get a return on investment. The return on investment is healthier students. And there's a report, and me, Cassandra, Kirk, all of us, we kind of talked about it. It was literally done on the city of Pittsburgh and the Pittsburgh Public Schools. This is about 3-4 years ago. And literally the report told us everything we already know. The kids are not eating well. We're spending millions of dollars on bad food and bad contracts. And we're spending millions of dollars to waste food through the school system. And here's how we can help. And shout out to the Food Policy Council. Shout out to Harvard Food Law Clinic. I was part of that group that put that information together, and it literally lives. And it's for Pittsburgh, and it's about that. So there's paperwork around this. So we are acting as if we don't have all the ingredients. And obviously I'm a chef. So when I think of having, all the flour and the water and the honey and the oil, and then I'm saying I'm starving, no, make some cakes, do something. You know what I mean? We have all the ingredients here in Pittsburgh. And I believe that, when we say apartheid, that's what it is. They're like systematically shutting us out. They're not asset framing. They're looking at it like, oh, the Hill District is a liability. The South Side, no one's there. That's false. You have some of the best people, some of the strongest people, resilient people. And last but not least, I got to say, they used to call the Hill District Little Haiti, and I'm Haitian. And if you know about the Haitian culture and you know about us being able to defeat the French and saying, hey, we don't want you to just give us stuff. We want to work on our own and fertilize and grow things and make our own systems. I think that's very on point and on par for what we're talking about right now.
Thank you so much, Chef Claudia. So Sister Aisha, we see your hand raised.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, you can.
Thank you. Thank you to all of the panelists. Y'all are so beautiful and so wise. I want to ask a question that's on the subject, but just walk with me for a second, because I've been living on the Hill District for 10 years. So the Hill District is my heart too. And when we think about how Salem's is about to come and occupy where Shop and Save used to be on the Hill, and everything that y'all are describing to us, how and what y'all are encouraging, whether it's building gardens or, being more entrepreneurial about the things that are going on. But what if when you start seeing the food that can be purchased through the restaurant, I don't know if it's going to be a restaurant or not, but the buffet that people are in love with from Salem's and maybe the small little grocery store, how are communities supposed to balance what y'all are recommending and advising happen? Because when you taste that food, you're gonna be like, oh, it's a wrap. I don't have to do anything anymore, because as long as I can afford going there and getting that food, or maybe trying to somehow identify with the different types of things that grocery store sells, because it's not the same as like a Giant Eagle. It's going to be spices and things that come from different parts of the world, foods and products that cater to the nationalities and ethnic groups that they come from. And so there's a part of me that's celebrating that we're getting Salem's, but now I'm listening to y'all and I'm like, oh, we might get a little comfortable and not feel motivated, because right in the heart of the Hill District is going to be Salem's. Like, does that question make sense? I'm just wondering how y'all see that.
Thank you, Sister I. Is there anyone that wants to speak to that?
I will say that even though there are differences in thought processes, we need to start somewhere. I think them coming in can be a great thing, especially because, like you said, they're bringing things from different areas. I think it's up to us to make sure that we hold people accountable, you know, not just other cultures, not just policymakers, but business owners. So I think it's up to us to really work with them. Like unfortunately, I remember putting in a bid to be at the same space, bringing in a grocery store. But the truth is, whoever is in that grocery store, I have to work with. So now, sister, I appreciate your thought process, right? And you're like, you know, you don't want to just have people eating prepared foods and not knowing themselves. We need to work with Salem's. We need to talk to them and give them our thought process. And I'm gonna be honest with you, they have been really receptive to a lot of things people are saying. Can I assure you that things are not gonna be, you know, a certain way? I can't, because I'm not part of that. But I will say, just to be truthful with you, we need something right now. And as they're coming, we need to start giving them our honest and optimistic feedback. And we do need to look at history and say, hey, these are the things that did not work. We don't want to, like Raynise said, we don't want to work. We don't want to have a disconnected organization running an operations there with our food. We need to sell. We need to have local product. We need to have all of our growers and all of our makers have things in the space. So that there's a lot of work to do. So I do appreciate your question, but I don't think that it's off the table. I truly don't. And I'm looking forward to working with them. And if it don't work, then that's when we start to say, hey, we need change. But I think for now, let's try to do our best to welcome something, because it hurts my heart that a lot of my students eat dinner from the dollar store. It just does. I swear. I hate to say it, but they do.
Thank you, Chef Claudia. Raynise, I saw that you wanted to respond. Can I come to you for a second?
Yes. I was saying, you know, that the question was very, very relevant. And as that was happening, I thought so much of Chef Claudia, because I knew that he was preparing to be into that space. And so as I knew he was there, I already knew what would come out of that. I already knew the collaborations and partnerships and meals and programming for teens and beyond. Like I was just like, yes, this is great. And then as it shifted, you know, my concerns were exactly as you mentioned. And it was like, you know, there are quite a few organizations and small businesses where people are really trying to push healthy eating. But what is healthy eating, right? It's different for everybody. And for some people, Salem's is healthy eating compared to the dollar store. And then there are people who are going to say, all right, well, even with Salem's, you know, you can take this out, you can do less of this. But I agree. I think with that dose of optimism and the right to vocally express how people have treated us in our community previously, what we've learned since they've left, because there was a time period where no one was there. So what happened? People implemented and did certain things and it worked. So now we want to say, this is what we've done. This is what we need to happen from your business so that we can support you. And if it doesn't, then we take our dollars elsewhere and we start, you know, strengthening and supporting other people who are doing what they need to. I think part of what we kind of lose in our power is our dollar. We work for it, we get it, and then we are excited about it, and then it just goes. And it's like, no, hold on to that, because if they're not serving you the way you need to, then maybe you got to go in your backyard and you got to grow what you need so that you can get everything it is that, you know, you're looking for. There are so many spaces for us to come together. We just got to go out and find it. And I'm so excited about this call and the people who are on there and the information we're sharing, because this is it.
Peace, Raynise. Thank you. Shinora, I know we haven't heard from you in response to the food apartheid question or Sister Aisha's just commentary and question around Salem's coming in as a partner in the Hill District. Do you have any insights that you would like to share?
I'll try to like just quickly wrap them both into kind of one answer, if I will.
Okay.
I don't want to repeat what Raynise or Claudia already said, because I think everything they said was on point. But when you identify neighborhoods as food deserts, you sometimes ignore the history that, our neighborhoods had grocery stores, we had farmers markets, we had fruit and vegetable stands, right? Gardens that were in the backyard. And the economic and political decisions, drove the industrial food system within our neighborhood to become abandoned, resulting in the food insecurity. And when we look at just the Pittsburgh community, if you think about it, like any community that starts with an H does not have a grocery store. Hilltop, Hill District, Homewood, Hazelwood, right? And so what does that, so our communities are lacking that. Our Black communities are lacking the access to healthy food, affordable food, which is how you are getting the food apartheid. When you look at Salim's, I truly believe that they have a heart to help, a heart to heal, and a heart to help give back to the community and give our community what it needs. I think they are open and receptive to partnering with food gardens for, that farm to table. I think they are open to using community vendors and local products. And so I think that will be a win for us if we use it right. I mean, as compared to, a Giant or Shop and Save that didn't even want to come here or do us, you walked in Shop and Save and you couldn't get quality food, right? And so with them being community-based and, starting small, I'm hoping that we can partner together to, use local vendors that can sell their stuff inside of the store. So we have to just build that trust, build that community to make sure that, it's a win for us.
Thank you, all of you.
Peace, and thank you, Sister I. And I agree. Again, I started this conversation saying I not only work in the Hill District, but this is my community, and I've been living and serving this community for more than half my life. And so it is a question that we need to ask, but I do think we have a willing partner with Salim's that'll help us be able to create these connections that are embedded within our food systems. And so that leads me right into the next question. Shinora talked a little bit about the economic and political systems that drove this industrialized food system that we currently are in away from our communities. Claudia, you've talked about the disconnect between our more traditional grocery stores that we see here in Pittsburgh and across the country. Raynise, you talked about the Shop and Save and the disconnect between the indigenous homegrown efforts that are on the ground. So what I would like to pose to you are, what are some policies? So we've talked about policies need to change, but let's call out, what are some policies and practices that are embedded within these food systems that lead to these disconnections, that lead to food access disparities in Black and Brown communities, locally across the country, historically and present day? The second part of that question, this is a long question. And in what ways is the work that you do an active form of resistance to these structural inequities and these policies in our local food systems?
You guys want me to jump in first? I will. So funniest thing is, for the last 6 years, I've been working with the Food Policy Council. And it's been a roller coaster. I'm gonna be transparent with you, because I understand policy takes time, but a lot of times we're not moving fast enough. And then the challenge is, every single person on this call right now, I love to put out call to actions. We are constantly saying, hey, this should be done, but what are you doing? And so working with the Food Policy Council was my way of saying, hey, I want to know what's going on, right? And when I realized that there's such a disconnect between the city and a lot of the grassroots organizations, there's a disconnect between the county and a lot of the grassroots organizations. Pennsylvania is the only Commonwealth with a farm bill. okay? And when you go into the Farm Bill, you'll understand that there is money, I mean millions and millions of dollars in a Farm Bill that the only state, Commonwealth that has. But if you don't understand policy and if you don't understand legislation, you can't even tap into the USDA's money and the state money. And so I think that the biggest disconnect is miseducation. I think the biggest disconnect is there are a lot of big farms and a lot of big contracts, like I'm gonna use dairy, right? Cow's milk, right? For one thing. Big multi-million-dollar contracts with schools, big marketing contracts that says you need cow's milk in order to be healthy. And now we come to find out like that's probably one of the furthest things we ever. So every single school in every single district had a contract with a farmer that had cows that was feeding our kids something that's excuse my French, darn near poisonous. You understand what I'm saying? That's the kind of systemic things that we have to join your local grassroots organization. You have to also understand who is making these deals. Is it so-and-so's cousin that now put money into the campaign that now, so this is bigger than just a conversation. And then you go into the universities, and I challenge I'm a Pitt guy. I challenge the Pitts and the Robert Morrises and the CMUs, because we now have to do an educational campaign around what this means and how we leverage policy and how we leverage one another and the people. And like someone said, I think it was Raynise, she said, you know, our diets are all different. Healthy food is different for every single person. You know, we need to understand the social determinants of health. We need to look at the UN goals, right? And we talk about everything from poverty, housing to hunger, which are at the top. And we say, oh, wow, this is a universal thing that's happening. What are they doing in other countries similar to Pittsburgh, like a Dartmouth, Germany? I know I'm on the Sister Cities panel where we speak about very similar things and looking at it like, okay, this is what you're doing. This is what we can adopt universities. But I think to what you're saying, the work has to start hyper local. You have to be a part of your local policy and change makers, your local government bodies, your local grassroots organizations, but also looking forward to a big thing. So I truly believe that, there's a lot of contracts. Just to go back full circle, there's a lot of huge contracts that could have went to small local people. There's capital that needs to go to smaller businesses to really drive the hyper local. I care about the Hill District, so making sure certain contracts go to certain local businesses and things of that nature, and having the capacity to have attorneys and accounting and things of that nature to help. That is what changes the system. And like I said, policy on a bigger level, leveraging your school systems and your local communities. So I said a lot there, but all of it is tying into between the people, the policy, the strategy, and programming.
Thank you, Chef Claudia. Raynise, I know you've been patiently waiting.
I had my mute button off this time because I couldn't get to it fast enough. Claudia was like, "Oh, y'all want me to go?" He's like, "Already ready." And I'm glad you did, because you hit all of the policy points. And so, I mean, just in short, there was redlining that happened, and, going back historically as a farmer standpoint, there were farmers who were denied land, who couldn't get loans to purchase land or couldn't get funding to replace equipment. And so they lost land, and that just really, really shrunk the amount of farmers, Black farmers, that we had in the US. And of course, just moving along from that point up into present, it makes it hard for that to be a job that somebody would even fathom. Who wants to be a farmer? Who wants to, you think about the few dollars they make, or how hard they have to work to get land, or, the actual backbreaking work of farming. Nothing about that is glorified. And so, our act of resilience is by implementing our programming for youth. Their minds are so open to things that they have their hands on. So when they plant seeds, when they use their shovels to, dig in the dirt, and when they water things, and when they see the transformation from just leaves to an actual produce, they're invested, and now they want to do more of this. They want to eat it. They want to see how this other plant grows. They want to see how many they'll get on there. And when we take them to places outside of Allegheny County and see how much space there is and what people are doing and how they got cows and chickens for pets and we got dogs and cats, it's like a completely different lifestyle, and one that's attainable and one that's fulfilling. But when you're in this space, and you don't see much of that, you don't hear much of that, you can't relate to it, you don't go to pursue that. So for Soil Sisters, as I mentioned, my grandparents owned a home in Belsuver. It burned down. My grandmother moved to Brentwood. She still pays property taxes on that land. It was vacant for 10 years before my sister and I decided to do something. And, easily there was someone who is from out of the country. They bought a house right next door. The family that was next door to us, we knew them all our lives. They sold it. And then they asked us, can they buy our land? They're like, now they own 2 houses on that very same street. They could have bought our vacant lot, and who knows what their plans are or what they'll do with it, who they'll move in. And we're like, absolutely not. We're from this community. We've been born and raised in Belsuver. We are going to offer something back to this space. So we continue to build on that idea from our nursery, that vacant lot where we'll produce seedlings, to offering that space to teens to come and learn how to grow and do that. Then we do our summer camps. So, even though it's not easy, you can do it with what you have, and working with and collaborating with other people throughout the region is what's really pushing us along.
Thank you, Raynise. And Shinora, we're going to come to you in a second. So the question we were responding to was kind of a 2-parter. So we wanted to call out what are some of the policies and practices embedded within these systems that create these disparities. And Claudia eloquently pointed out things like the language that's in the Farm Bill that could be utilized by homegrown grassroots organizations, but there's just not enough knowledge or outreach about those policies that could benefit our communities. Things like the USDA and pushing for food consumption on things that we know aren't healthy for us. So I would just want your perspectives, and Shinora and Raynise was just speaking to that, and then also how the work she does now directly counteracts these policies that are embedded within our systems. So I would like to give you an opportunity. What are some practices and policies that lead to these disparities? If there's anything else that you want to elaborate on, and then how is the work that you are doing specifically an active form of resistance to these structural pieces in place?
I want to just come from the lens of community building and so using our youth as advocates, and like as a food justice advocate, working with the marginalized population, working with our community garden so that we can teach and show them from an early age how to live a sustainable lifestyle, right? So during the summer, we have coming up programs that they're going to be actively learning and growing and being able to take healthy food home. And so that's how we at CARES are actively trying to take down the structural inequity of the food systems, and just helping our community be an advocate for itself. And that's all I really have to say about that.
No, thank you, Shinora. And I think it's profound that both in your response to the work that you do now and how that addresses these structural inequities, you and Raynise pointed out the work that you do with young people through programs, through really helping young people understand the need and importance around looking at food insecurity and developing these habits and awareness. So it's embedded in their growth as they become adults. Claudia, I want to give you just another little piece to talk about some of the work you do and how that is an active form of resistance, because I know you do a lot. And you did a great job talking about the policies, but I didn't want to move on until you could highlight a couple of the things that you do that actively address some of these structural inequities.
So one of the biggest things is just stirring the pot a little bit, right? So, talking to people in different positions and just reminding them, like, you do know that we all have to eat. You do know that I don't care if you black, white, I don't care if you're short, tall, if you're from the country or out of the country, that's the one thing that we all have in common. So when I hear everything about all the other things in the world, if your students are not eating from early childhood development to middle school, high school, like even as adults, we get hangry. If you're not making sure that the people in your community are eating and have access to fresh produce and food, which is a basic human right, like running water, then you are not the person for the job. So that's one, right? So let's just, I don't mind telling some of my peers and my friends this, that are running for offices, that are in executive director positions. That is a basic human right you need to be making sure is at the forefront of your mind. One. The second thing is we're working on something called foodsecurecity.com. Foodsecurecity.com is my baby. It's been about 4 years. And we just basically want to break the silos. We have the grassroots organizations that are on this call, like CARES Community Cafe and Soil Sisters, myself, and we have organizations like 412 Food Rescues and the University of Pittsburgh's and the banks. And we want to break the silo. We want to create a hub. We want to create a place where no matter what, you can go to Food Secure City. Because why isn't Pittsburgh a food secure city? When you think about the philanthropy that people are throwing money at some really whack, excuse my French, initiatives, that don't work. And you'd be like, you really just gave them $100,000, and so I'm just constantly appalled and amused by when people say, yeah, we really did no, that was a horrible initiative. You need to put your money where your mouth is, literally and figuratively, right? So where your mouth is what people eat. How to develop the school system lunches, how to go back into the grassroots organizations, help them be capitalized, help them have capacity to actually deal with the hyper-local things that are happening. And then lastly, I'm gonna be honest with you, really tapping into public-private relationships, really saying to yourself, look, we got the Allegheny conferences and we have the mayor's offices and we have the Vibrant Pittsburghs and we have the K&L Gates and the Chatham and the Federateds all here, all have a DE&I, we want to do diversity and inclusion. All right, put your money where your mouth is. We need to raise capital. We need to leverage the people that are doing the actual work and putting a battery on their back, whether it's money, whether it's land. The URA has all this land. Their inventory is crazy, and not all of it is cultivated, but we can do raised beds. We can do certain things. And I know, I don't know it all when it comes to urban ag. So that's why I call a Raynise, right? I can't be everywhere at once. So guess what? I call Shinora. Believe it or not, the people on this call actually have relationship. We have a relationship with each other and we have a relationship with the community. You can't tell me you want to help the community if you're not allowing the community to help it. We are the answers. We are our ancestors' wildest dreams. We are the answer. So let's utilize the fact that we are educated. We are zealous. We are extremely happy to do the work. And we've been doing it for free. So now we need to compensate people. We need to make sure that we're leveraging all these universities and all the resources that we have. We need to utilize all these corporations that are getting tax credits and making a ton of money in this region when we need to tap in. And even something as little as, and it's not about, oh yeah, you're rich and you need to pay for it. No, how do we get that money to trickle down into it? Like I said, the tale of the two districts, right? You got the cultural district on this hand, multi-million, billion-dollar industry, theater, all that, right? And then you have the Hill District, literally less than a mile away. Make it make sense. So I think that's where, when we talk about foodsecurecity.com, make sure you guys check it out. We're developing it. We're raising capital. We want to bring everyone together. It's not mine. It's not Eat Initiatives. It's everybody's. But we want to create something where if I'm standing in Hazelwood, or I'm standing on the South Side, or I'm standing in the Hill District, I can look up foodsecurecity.com and I have access to a pantry. I have access to food. I have access to a blessing box. We do something with blessing, we call it blessing boxes, where we just package up fresh produce and we say, hey, here it is. And if you're Muslim, we're not giving you pork. We're not just blanket giving people food. We're like, hey, we know you're Seventh-day Adventist, or you're Muslim, or you don't eat this, or you do eat that. And understanding, hey, he's hypertension, this person's pre-diabetic. We care, we actually care. And that's all I'm asking. So that's some of the stuff that we've been able to do. So check it out, foodsecurecity.com.
Thank you, Chef Claudia. So before we move on to, and I felt all that passion, and thank you for bringing it in the way that I wanted you to. Before we move on to our next question, which we've touched upon, and I want to call it out in a little bit. I wanted to comment on a comment that we had in the chat, specifically as it relates to Hazelwood. So there are some homegrown initiatives in Hazelwood, one of which is being led by Diane Shank, and I know Diane very well, and she does great work out of Dillamato's Market. They're providing, good, fresh, local choices in Hazelwood, but it's not a supermarket. She's trying to fill this void, and it speaks to, Claudia, some of your comments about compensation and people doing this work for free. And we know that there are opportunities embedded within some of these policies where there could be resources to support work. So I just wanted to highlight that and bring that out in our discussion. So the next question that I wanted to pose, we've heard a lot about we need to start hyperlocal. Naomi put a comment in the chat a few minutes ago about this work being our responsibilities, the community's responsibility to resolve. And so I would like to start with Raynise. Let's talk a little bit about why you think it's important for communities to be self-sufficient and self-determined in response to food apartheid and insecurity, and not waiting for someone else to come save us. Why is this important?
Because we got the answers. Because they don't live here. Because before I moved out of my house, I was living in my parents' house, and before my mom moved out, my grandmother still lives in the house that she lives in. Like, there is a connection that no one outside of here can tell me about. And you can't just be here for, a year or two. You got to have some families invested in this and, been there at the time where there were ideal living conditions, and can compare that to how are we making it work today, but it's working. And whenever all of those people come together and they talk about, well, so-and-so has chickens and I've been getting eggs from her and I've been growing greens and freezing them. And so we, this bartering that happens between the community because I have so-and-so's number, or because my aunt was at church and talked to this, there's an interconnection that happens that not even social media can do, right? Like, you go and walk your dog and happen to see some people and y'all just spark a conversation. You can't post that. It just happened on the spot. So when there's an issue, a lot of times the solutions are just like that. It happens on the spot. A call of action sometimes isn't even a call. It's a feeling. I just felt like something was going on. So I came out here. This is what I have. This is how I'm going to show up and, help my community. Whenever those things come about, the community's happy. Everybody's good. Everybody is, not much to complain about. We're going to complain about something, but not much. But when people come from outside and they just say, hey, I don't see this here, so let's just put that there. And it's like, wait a minute, every Sunday we have kickball there, the kids are there. Like, that wasn't the ideal place for that. We did need it, but we don't need it right there. So, there's not many times where the community is getting to be a part of the conversation before something happens. It happens, and then you're telling the community. And that's why a lot of the other initiatives aren't so fulfilling, because the process wasn't done right. So, I think in the cases where we take it upon ourselves to do what we need to do, and one day someone comes along and says, you know what, I've noticed that you've been doing this, that, and the third, I want to support you by giving this, or I want to support you by offering that, or I want to support you by standing next to you to learn so I can fill in if you need to take off. I don't think there's any way that can happen with somebody who doesn't want to spend time or hasn't spent time in a space that is their home and they had to live without.
Thank you so much, Raynise. Shinora, I want to come to you with the same question. Raynise just very powerfully and eloquently responded to, why she feels it's important, why she knows it's important for communities to be self-sufficient and self-determinant in response to food apartheid and food insecurity. And so, Shinora, I would love to hear your perspectives on that as well.
Yeah, I think it all just ties back to our babies, our children, our youth, right? Because research does show that there's an association between food insecurity and delayed development in our young children, which leads to, the risk of chronic illness like asthma and anemia, different behavioral problems like hyperactivity and anxiety and potentially aggression in our school-age children. Like if they're not eating right, if they're not eating correctly, if they're not getting fresh meals in the morning before they go to school, like they aren't able to succeed. And they're just starting, they're starting at a deficit. So I think it's important for us as a community to be self-sufficient because our babies need us and they need to start with a head start and not behind the A game.
Can I say one thing real quick, Kirk?
Yes, Claudia. Yep.
In addition to what she's saying about chronic illness and the actual physical, the mental and emotional stress and compound trauma that comes with it, right? So people not eating, students just having major issues, moms, dads, like really having, like when you don't eat, you don't feel good. So it's a physical thing, but it's a spiritual, emotional thing as well. And some of our students are so tired and they get into the classes and they're just emotionally spent. And a lot of that could be fixed if you just literally fix that piece in their stomach. You know what I mean? So I just wanted to add that piece to what Shinora said as well.
No, thank you, Claudia. And that's a perfect segue into what the next question was really going to be about, right? I started today's discussion saying we were going to start at a high level and really talk about why food justice is needed. Why food apartheid is the proper framing of these issues, how the work you all are doing is directly addressing these systemic barriers. And now I want to bring it back to education and CUESEF and how this impacts our most precious resource, which is our community children and their learning. And so you touched a bit upon this, but I want to kind of call it out a little more. So what impacts does food insecurity and lack of access to healthy foods have on our educational systems? What impacts does it have on our students' learning? What are the available food resources in our schools right now? How may that need to be examined and changed? And so, Raynise, we're going to start with you on this question. Again, what is the impacts this has on our education systems, our children, and their learning?
Yeah, I can give you an example of saying I heard many a times as a learning or an educator for Grow Pittsburgh, going into the schools and teaching, experiencing gardening with the students. A phrase I always heard was, I'm not doing this slave work. I'm not no slave. And we had to stop and have a history lesson because I'm like, well, the first thing is that identifying you aren't a slave is one thing that a slave didn't even do. Like they didn't even know. They were working and they knew this is what they had to do. And you having this exchange with me is one thing that a slave would never be able to do. So by no means, even what you're learning in school compared to this outside setting, it's not the same. And it's so hurtful to think that our kids still, carry that trauma because growing food is empowering. Like it is something that, when we say what you have in your brain, what you learn, they can't take away from you. What you grow in your garden, aside from some rodents and carrying on groundhogs, they can't take away from you, right? You save your seeds. Now you are forever feeding yourself. You're feeding yourself and a community. And so it was always just like really disheartening when I heard that, but I have an opportunity to change that narrative by showing these students that, not only are you getting an opportunity to heal yourself from your food because it's your medicine, you are healing the earth. There's been so much torn up, so much trauma in the earth. You know, when you plant seeds, when you water it, when you weed things so that it gets more sun and it gets more air, like that is a service to the earth that is, energy is going back into yourself. And so having an opportunity to slow the day down for these kids and just appreciate the wind, right? It's a hot day, but you're moving around, slow down, like catch a breeze. And, once you slow your day down and realize like you control that, you actually can appreciate, all right, the wind is blowing, the trees are going, take your shoes off, you want your feet in the grass, and all of these things that kids are just like not even thinking about. And every Saturday as we meet them for camp, next thing you know, like kids are walking in with their shoes off. And parents are like, I cannot get them to keep their shoes on their feet. And I'm like, yeah, yesterday we walked around for 4 hours just with our shoes off and turned over rocks and found bugs and like really connected with the earth. And that's just something that, our kids are not getting the opportunity to do. And the more we stress that, the more we are realizing like we've been taken away from our homes, not the structural home, but we've been taken away from the earth in a way that's really causing some serious detriment. So I try to reverse that and do things in a different case with the little ones.
Thank you, Raynise. And as I hear you speaking and your passion and your energy, like I was, getting goosebumps over here. It's you were painting a picture of the impact that your work is having on young people. And I think it's really beautiful. Claudia, I wanted to provide an opportunity for you to respond or add on.
Well, she hit it. It's hard to follow her sometimes. The truth is, once they get that grounding, once they are literally connected, it makes it very difficult for you to actually stop them from continuing to do this, which is a beautiful thing. Like you should see my students that are growing things, they eat completely different than my students who aren't. They think completely differently. They're optimistic, like they're positive vibes. They know that they can have a piece of fruit in the morning and change their whole entire day. They can learn better. So it's just crazy how those impacts, like literally. And then the other thing is food connects people. So I love gathering, okay? And that's the thing, not just gathering food, but gathering people and saying, hey, not just here's a fish, how to fish, right? So once those students and those kids get into it, grandma and grandpa gets into it, right? Big brother and big sister and mom and dad, everybody else starts to connect around food. And when that happens, it changes the whole entire game. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I told you about the report that already says everything that we know, but I'm just going to put it out there. I'm just going to put it out there right now. If we do not go back, if we don't start taking some of these tablets away, if we don't start trying to take some of these cell phones away and getting everybody back into that garden, we are dying at a faster rate than everybody else for so many other reasons, whether it's chronic illness, whether it's, gun violence. If we do not take away some of the things that we are so addicted to, and we don't go back into that garden and back into food and looking at food and cooking together and doing certain things, we're basically extinct. We're going to be extinct. We're going to be that group of people that were so talented and so great that never could do it. And I just want to scare people. I want people to feel like this is a necessity. Food is a necessity. Understanding food and policy and making sure we have access to fresh produce and food is a necessity for so many reasons, but really because we need it to live. And I'm going to just leave it at that. I feel like we're hitting it so hard, but this is the kind of conversation that, we need to really, truly believe and then start acting on it. I don't want a whole bunch of scholars to keep coming to a call all the time. Do something about it. And that's real. I'm sorry. I see it all the time. These, really smart people. No, like get into the garden with everybody else. Come on. You know what I mean? And really make this thing happen.
Thank you so much, Claudia. Shinora, I wanted to give you an opportunity to respond. The question was about education, what impact some of the work you can have on the education system, but it's also evolved into just talking about the importance of educating young people or communities about getting back into the garden. Any reflections or things you want to add on?
No, I mean, like someone in the comments said, like that was some passion action, and it's definitely hard to follow that up. But to piggyback on it, our healing garden kind of started as our healing house started as a community kitchen, and being able to, as Black people, everyone always congregates to the kitchen, right? And so being able to talk and have therapy while you're talking, it doesn't feel like you're in therapy, but going back to community and being together as one and just talking through things, I think is really important, and using food as that avenue to get people together and kind of just like talk through what happened in the day. Because, you know, when you get home, like right now, like Carly was saying, like everyone's addicted to these iPads, and like you can't even have dinner together because everyone's on the phone and everyone's doing, you know, they're not focused. But like if we as a community come together, we're able to like be in tune with each other, see what each other's needs, and therefore work through the inner healing that we need, that comes together through food. And yeah.
Thanks so much, Shinora. So this has been a great discussion, guys, and I know we're about to come up on our time together, and there's one, you know, final question that I had prepared for you all. This discussion has both been educational, but really, really powerful, right? And we've seen that passion come across from all of you all as panelists, whether we're talking about policies, whether we're talking about the work that we do with young people, or just the importance of being self-sufficient and doing things as a community. So I thank you all for that. What I want to do now is just give you guys some time to think about this next question. Shinora, I'm gonna come to you first. Then I'm gonna go to Raynise, and Claudia, we're gonna have you close us out on this question, right? We still should have some time left for some questions from the audience. But I want us to think about what your vision is for the future of food justice locally, at the neighborhood and city level. And more broadly, if you care to dream that big across the nation. And what would it take to get there? So what is your vision for food justice locally, the neighborhood, city, or national level? And what do you know or feel it will take to get there? Shinora?
Yes, I think creating awareness of the issues and what will happen to our community if we don't put food first, and educate people. I think there's a couple different ways that we can fight food justice, and that is like fighting for land access. Like, so maybe partnering with the URA to, like Claudia said, get some of that land and help grow. Defending the rights that we have, championing for food education, adopting different farming techniques that we can use to help grow and to help provide access, doing simple things like sharing seeds. I think my vision would be to just get healthy food in the hands of the community. Even with the food that we have and have grown at the CARES and Sunny Garden in the Hill District, sometimes it often can go to waste because people don't even know that it's there, know that it's free. So a call to action that I have is that if you're ever in the community, or if you ever know anyone who may need onions and peppers and greens or what have you, like come get fresh food that's grown, that's local. And that's what what I would like to see is fresh food in the hands of people. And I'm asking you to come and get what you need for free. 613 Granville Street in the heart of the Hill.
Thank you so much, Shinora, for that beautiful vision and that very real call to action. And I got to stop down and get me some some onions and peppers soon.
Yeah, I made some greens the other Sunday. I was like, oh, let me go to the garden real quick.
Yeah, I got to come down there.
Quicker to go to the south side with no grocery store. All right.
Well,
all right, so Raynise.
Yeah, I was just at Sunny's Garden getting greens. I got some beets. I'm waiting for potatoes. Those are almost ready. I think every time I ride past the garden, there's somebody there So if you do go, there'll be somebody there to invite you, show you around, and Miss Sheila will probably be there with her little pruner so that she can snip off whatever it is that you want so you can take it with you. So part of my vision is already happening. Sunny's Garden buys seedlings from Soil Sisters. I don't get a lot of time to garden myself because I'm doing the little plant baby. So I get to pop up and get some of the actual produce. And I would love to see there be a more regional seed producer, and I was buying seeds from someone who was regionally, and then I'm growing them, and then they're being purchased by a community garden that's growing them to a space, and then maybe Claudia is getting those produce delivered to him and he prepares the meal. And that's the type of system that I want to see. And to Claudia's point, having the capacity where that grows beyond just these 3 neighborhoods, and that, he has this space where he's preparing more than just once a week for one community, having the ability to educate enough people so that we move on as educators, move on to other spaces to help educate and teach other people in areas, and just getting us all to a point where if there ever came a time where we couldn't depend on the city or the state, like we've already gotten these systems in place, and we don't need them. So we're already making small steps to get to where I foresee our food system in the future. It's just going to take more work that we've been doing, more conversations, more calls of action, and actually acting.
Thank you so much, Raynise. Chef Claudia.
I think a lot of the things that both the panelists said, and even you, Kirk, great job today by just roping it all together. This is what I want to see more of, us having open dialogue, honest dialogue, right? That's the first thing. So the education piece is the biggest piece. Educating our community that actually you can eat healthier. And it actually is all around you, right? It's not like we can actually access it. And how do we access it? We use that same tablet that I said, throw in the trash sometimes. We use that same thing to tap into where things are, a network. We need to continue to do things to educate our people of how to get to it, how to make, and I'm gonna be honest with you. I remember the Penguins, who I work with, they had multiple food distributions, and they're like, we had low attendance. And I'm like, you're in a lower hill. There's no reason why you didn't sell out of everything, not even sell out of everything you have, but because you don't have a connection. So this is about connectivity. This is about educating our people where things are, what they are. There's some people that when I tell them what an orange versus a tangerine versus a cutie versus, they're like, oh, literally like, oh. And it's not a diss. They just don't know. So I think the biggest thing is the education piece. I think we also need to talk about the breaking the silos. We have 30,000 philanthropy and all these organizations working around, raising awareness. We need to talk about food and how bringing it together in early childhood development and gathering and coming together. We need to tap into the money. There's money here. When I go to LinkedIn, that's where the money resides. You know what I mean? Like, tap into your networks. Really make sure that people understand that we need money to make these things work. And it's not just me, it's not just one or the other, it's all of us. And if we're doing something collectively, we need to work together and break the silos. Lastly, I'm gonna say the people of Pittsburgh, and I'm going hyper-local, Hill District, Hilltop, Homewood. These are the people you want on your team. We could be feisty, we could be ready to go sometimes, but you want all these, the South Side, the North Side, you want these people on your team. So invest in them. They're assets, not liabilities, not a deficit. Stop talking about our people like we raggedy and we trash. We're not. You know what I mean? Stop talking about our community. Let's do beautification projects. Let's clean up some of these places. Let's make sure it looks the part. Living on Wiley for 5 years, I'm like, constantly, I'm walking up and down the block, brooming and sweeping because I love where I live. I want it to feel and look good. Stop thinking that the only way to do it is to throw $20 here or there, or, hey, I was on a panel. No, get your hands dirty. Get your family in there. So that's what my vision is. And start small. You don't got to do it all. Start in your hood, or start in a hood that you know needs it. So I truly believe that we're getting closer. I truly believe that we have a lot of things that are going to come out of even discussions like this. I'm speaking on another panel with some other people next week. I'll send it over to everybody, but keep talking about it, educate one another, and make it a real campaign to educate people and for people to do things. And I love the call to action. Stop by Sonny's. Make sure you grab your seedlings from Soil Sisters. Continue to pop up on these panels. Come through the EAT initiative. We have all types of blessing boxes and blessing bags. We'll get it to you if you need to. Fresh produce, we have access to it. Let's go. Let's continue to talk kindly to each other and about each other and build each other up.
Thank you, Chef Claudia. So honestly, guys, I think this was a tremendous conversation today. I was looking in the chat and I saw Sonia's comment about her eyes have been opened. About the importance of this work, and now I'm paraphrasing, right? But also just how much we have an opportunity to continue to do special things here in the Hill District, Pittsburgh, and beyond. I think that not only was today's discussion, again, educational, I think for all of us, it created some type of impact, and hopefully will collectively get our community to continue working together to enhance the impact and the ripple effects that have already started to reverberate. I think that I don't think there's anything else we can do. I see Elon, I see your comments. It was a rich discussion. Thank you. Guys, I think this was perfect. I wouldn't want to add anything to take away from the energy I think we're all leaving with. Raynise and Claudia and Shinora, I think we all know, and I knew coming into today that you guys do phenomenal work, but then really hearing it highlighted and the passion behind it, knowing that you guys are not only doing great work, but you're doing it for the right reasons, and you're doing it for our communities and our people, really just, fills me up and leaves me, with a lot to think about today. And I thank all of our participants who were privileged to be a part of this discussion. Hopefully this will have impact and as we move forward. So I would like to just close by thanking everyone for coming out and being part of the final day of CUESEF 2022 and a part of this great discussion. Shinora, Claudia, and Raynise, keep up the great, phenomenal work. And I look forward to connecting with you all personally. And anything you guys need, please let us know. Thank you, everybody.